Welcome to English Insights. Today, we're diving into Cinderella in America by William Bernard McCarthy, a fascinating exploration of how traditional folktales evolved across America's diverse communities.
Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going on a journey through American folktales.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
It is going to be fun. We're not just going to talk about like the stories themselves, though.
Okay.
But how they've been, collected and studied over the years.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like stepping behind the scenes of your favorite childhood stories, and seeing how these tales have been shaped and passed down through generations.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
And the book we're diving into today, it really emphasizes that these tales are more than just entertainment.
Right.
They offer glimpses into different cultures and historical periods, and even like ways of understanding the world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes folklore so fascinating, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of the first things the book tackles is the way we use the term fairy tale.
Oh, interesting.
You might use it for any kind of magical story, but scholars have a much more specific definition.
Right.
It's one of those things you don't realize until someone points it out to you. Like suddenly you see the difference between like a tale passed down through generations and something written down by an author, right? Think about the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
They collected stories that had been around for ages, while Hans Christian Andersen mostly wrote original tales.
Oh, that's a good point.
And that distinction is super important here.
Absolutely.
Because this book is really focused on those oral folk tales, the ones deeply rooted in American communities.
Right.
And it argues that they've been unfairly overlooked in folklore studies.
That's really interesting. You'd think with stories like Uncle Remus being so well known, there'd be tons of research on that kind of storytelling in America.
Yeah, you'd think so. But the book points out that scholarly interest actually started much earlier than that.
Oh.
Way back in the late 1800s, scholars like William Wells Newell were already publishing collections of American folk tales.
So this wasn't just like some passing fad. It was a serious academic pursuit.
Exactly. It's like they recognized the value of these stories even back then. What's even cooler is that the book talks about the WPA Writers Projects during the Great Depression.
Oh, right.
And how those contributed to the field.
Those projects were remarkable, Imagine teams of writers going out and recording tales from all over the country,
Right.
and many of whom were struggling themselves at the time.
Right.
It really speaks volumes about the power of stories, even in tough times.
Totally. It's like a testament to the human need to share and preserve stories, no matter what's going on in the world.
Absolutely.
It's like they were preserving voices that might have otherwise been lost to history.
Yeah.
And that brings us to something really central to this book, the voices of the storytellers themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
The book draws upon collections from all sorts of different communities across America.
Right.
And while we're obviously reading written versions of these tales,
Right.
there's a real effort to capture the spirit of those original oral performances. It's like you could almost hear the rhythms and inflections of the storytellers as you read.
Exactly. And the editors of this book had to make some tough choices, I'm sure,
Oh, yeah.
trying to enhance readability without losing that authenticity.
Right.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
It makes you realize how tricky it is to capture the essence of something that's meant to be heard, not just read,
Yeah, it really does.
It's like, how do you convey the nuances of a storyteller's voice, their pauses and their emphasis on the page?
Right.
It's almost like trying to explain a joke sometimes.
Totally.
Sometimes the delivery is everything.
It really is, yeah.
And this book, it actually digs into that idea,
Oh, cool.
exploring how the language of oral storytelling has its own rhythm and structure.
Yeah.
They call it ethnopoetry.
I love that term.
Me too. It's like recognizing that these tales aren't just words on a page.
Right.
They're woven together with sound and performance in mind.
It's like a different way of thinking about language itself.
Right, exactly. And it's not a coincidence, Think about where these stories were often told, like around campfires,
Oh, yeah.
in dimly lit homes.
Right.
The spoken word had a special power in those settings.
Absolutely.
It makes me want to experience those stories firsthand,
Yeah.
to hear them performed aloud.
That would be amazing.
Now, I'm curious, how do these American folktales connect to stories from other parts of the world?
Ooh, good question.
Are there any surprising links? Like unexpected connections?
There are, and that's where tale types come in.
Tale types, what are those?
It's a system that scholars use to classify folktales based on their core plot elements.
Okay.
regardless of where they're told.
So it's like looking for the DNA of a story, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you might have a tale that's told in America, but it shares a similar structure with a tale from Europe or Asia or Africa.
So even though we're talking about American folktales, they might share like a common ancestor with stories from all over the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so intriguing, you know? It highlights those global connections, revealing how stories can travel across oceans and continents, changing and adapting along the way.
It's like these folktales are carrying pieces of different cultures within them, little clues to a shared human history.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Now, I know this book isn't just about theory.
Right.
It's packed with actual folktales
Well, yeah.
from diverse communities across America.
And that diversity is incredible, you know?
Yeah.
You'll find Iberian and Cape Verdean tales.
Wow.
Stories rooted in French, British, African American, and Native American traditions. It's like taking a whirlwind tour of America's storytelling heritage.
Let's start with those Iberian folktales, shall we? The book mentions these Juan Bobo tales,
Oh, yes. Those are great.
which sound like they're full of humor
Yeah.
and kind of a trickster element.
Juan Bobo is a classic trickster figure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Often underestimated by those around him, but always managing to outsmart them.
Oh, I love that.
It's a reminder that intelligence can come in all sorts of packages.
Right, exactly. And that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover or a folktale hero by their initial appearance. And then there's The Flower of Olivar, which sounds like a classic quest tale full of magic and adventure.
It is. It's got all the elements.
The book doesn't reveal too much about it,
Right.
but it hints at some pretty intense challenges that the hero has to face.
It's like a little teaser to pique your interest.
It worked.
I know.
I definitely want to read that one now.
Me too.
Next up, we have Cape Verdean tales, which the book describes as a unique blend of Portuguese and African traditions.
Those are really fascinating.
It's a reminder of how diverse American culture really is, you know?
Yeah,
How so many different influences have come together to create something new.
absolutely. And these Cape Verdean tales often reflect that blending of cultures,
Oh, that's
with stories that touch on themes of migration, identity, and the challenges of preserving traditions in a new land.
The book highlights one called No Lob in the Moon, which just sounds adorable.
Oh, it is.
It's an animal tale with a hero who's a little too human for his own good.
I love those kinds of stories.
Me too. They're always so relatable.
And the use of Criollo phrases sprinkled throughout the story
Oh, wow.
adds another layer of cultural richness, you know? It's like you're getting a glimpse into a world that's both familiar and entirely new.
Speaking of cultural richness, let's move on to the French tradition.
Okay.
The book explores how French folktales found a home in Louisiana and Missouri.
Oh, right. Those areas have such strong French roots.
They do.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see how those tales continue to be shared and celebrated today, you know, keeping that French heritage alive.
It really speaks to the power of stories to connect us to our past and to each other.
I love that.
It's like a thread that runs through generations, binding us together.
The book mentions Bouki and La Pen, which sound like trickster tales.
They're very similar to the Brer Rabbit stories we'll be talking about later.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost as if these trickster figures are universal, you know,
Sure.
appearing in different forms across cultures.
It's like there's something about their wit and cunning that we find both amusing and relatable.
Totally. Like, we all know someone who's a bit of a trickster, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we can't help but be entertained by their antics, even if we know we shouldn't be.
Right, exactly. It's like we recognize a bit of ourselves in those trickster figures, that desire to bend the rules and outsmart the system.
Maybe jagged a little bit.
Now let's head over to the Appalachian region,
Okay.
where British folk tales have a strong presence.
That's a region rich in storytelling.
It really is. The book focuses on Jack tales, featuring a recurring hero named Jack,
Oh, I love those.
who always seems to find clever solutions to tricky problems.
Jack is a classic example of a folk hero.
He is. He embodies that resourcefulness and resilience that's often associated with rural life, you know?
Absolutely. Like, he's a reminder that you can overcome any obstacle with a little bit of ingenuity and a lot of determination.
And the book suggests that these Jack tales offer a window into the values and worldview of the Appalachian communities that tell them.
That's one of the most powerful things about folktales, I think. They give us glimpses into different cultures, perspectives, and historical moments, you know? They're not just entertainment, they're vessels of cultural knowledge.
It's like each story is a little time capsule preserving a way of life that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's so true.
And now, for a figure who's practically synonymous with American folklore, Brer Rabbit.
Ah, Brer Rabbit, the master of wit and survival.
The book emphasizes Brer Rabbit's ability to adapt,
Yeah.
how he uses his cunning to outsmart larger and stronger adversaries.
It's a story of resilience, of finding ways to thrive even when the odds are stacked against you.
And often there's a moral lesson woven into these tales, disguised within the humor and trickery. It's like a
Right.
reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for cleverness and resistance.
Exactly.
The book shares some fantastic anecdotes from these Brer Rabbit stories. The humor is contagious, but there's also this underlying sense of defiance of finding ways to subvert power structures.
Right. It's like he's always one step ahead.
He's a master strategist.
Yeah. And it's not just about outsmarting his opponents. It's about challenging the status quo,
Right.
poking fun at those in power.
Exactly. And that's what makes Brer Rabbit such a compelling figure. He represents the underdog, the one who uses their wit and cunning to navigate a world that's often unfair and unpredictable.
Absolutely.
Finally, let's turn our attention to Native American tales.
Okay.
The book emphasizes the incredible diversity of storytelling traditions within this vast cultural landscape.
Yeah, it's crucial to remember that Native American encompasses a multitude of distinct cultures, each with its own unique stories, beliefs, and ways of life.
Absolutely. And the book does a great job of highlighting that diversity.
It does. It's very sensitive to those nuances.
One example it gives is The Code Prince, a story that shows how European tales have been integrated into Native American storytelling.
That's a beautiful example of how storytelling traditions can intertwine and influence each other, creating something new and unique in the process.
Right. It's like a reminder that culture isn't static. It's constantly evolving and adapting, taking in new influences and making them its own.
Exactly. It's a beautiful process.
It's like a cultural conversation, with stories acting as the language that bridges different worlds.
That's a great way to think about it.
And speaking of different worlds, how do these folktales, so often rooted in rural communities and oral traditions, fare in a world increasingly dominated by technology and mass media?
That's a great question, and one that this book tackles head on.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear more about that.
We'll delve deeper into that in our next segment,
Okay.
exploring how these tales have adapted and evolved to stay relevant in a changing world.
Awesome. I'm already hooked.
Me too. It's a fascinating topic.
Until then, our listener, we encourage you to think about the folktales you grew up with.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
What do they say about your own cultural heritage?
Good question.
And how have those stories shaped your understanding of the world?
Definitely something to think about.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of American folktales, so stay tuned.
See you then. Welcome back. As we delve deeper into this book, it becomes clear that American folktales aren't just isolated stories. They're interconnected in ways that might surprise you.
You've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Well,
Tell me more.
remember those tale types we talked about? They're not just academic tools. They actually help us see how certain stories have traveled across cultures, sometimes changing dramatically along the way.
So it's not just about, borrowing plots.
Right.
It's about how those plots are reshaped to fit different cultural contexts.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
One example the book gives is tale type ATU 480, known as the Kind and Unkind Girls.
Okay.
There's an American version collected in the 1800s.
Wow, that's a while ago.
It is, and it actually centers on 2 boys instead of girls.
Oh, okay. So already there's a twist on the familiar formula.
Right.
I'm intrigued.
So in this American version, the 2 brothers are sent on a quest, and along the way, they encounter a series of challenges that test their character.
Oh, I see. Like those classic fairy tale trials.
Exactly. One brother is kind and helpful, the other is greedy and rude.
Classic archetypes.
Right. And just like in the traditional tale, their actions have consequences.
It sounds like a classic morality tale, emphasizing the importance of kindness and compassion.
It is, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
There's a similar tale type found in Eastern European traditions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But instead of 2 brothers,
Yeah.
it features 3 sisters who have to rescue their baby brother from a witch.
Wow, that's quite a departure. Same basic structure, but with totally different characters and a much, higher stakes plot.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how did these stories travel across continents?
Right. How did they change and adapt along the way?
It's like a giant puzzle waiting to be solved.
It is. It's like a global game of storytelling telephone.
And it makes you realize that these folktales aren't just static texts.
No.
They're living, breathing things that evolve as they're shared and retold.
Speaking of living, breathing things, what about those Wambobo tales we mentioned earlier? The book gives us an actual example, right?
It does. It's called Juan Bobo and the Riddling Princess.
Ooh, riddles.
I know, right?
Okay, riddle me this. What makes Juan Bobo such a compelling character?
Well, he's kind of a lovable fool, often underestimated by those around him.
But I bet he always manages to come out on top.
He does. He's got a knack for outsmarting people who think they're smarter than him.
I'm sensing a theme here. These folktales love to celebrate the underdog.
They do, and in this particular tale, Juan Bobo is tasked with winning the hand of a princess who's famous for her tricky riddles.
Oh, I love that. A battle of wits.
It is, and of course Juan Bobo, he manages to pull it off.
I knew it.
In a way that's both hilarious and unexpected.
That's awesome. So how does he do it? Does he actually solve the riddles?
Well, he uses his wit, a bit of luck, and even gets some help from a magical creature named Jujuyana.
Oh, wow. Magical helper.
It's a classic example of a tale where brains aren't everything.
Right.
Sometimes it's about using what you have in clever and unexpected ways.
That's a great message.
Yeah.
Especially for, anyone who's ever felt underestimated or overlooked.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that there's more than one way to be intelligent.
It's a reminder that these stories aren't just about entertainment.
Right.
They're about offering a different perspective on the world.
Exactly. And sometimes that perspective involves a healthy dose of trickery.
Speaking of trickery, the book mentions another Iberian tale, The Basil Maiden, which also features riddles and a clever heroine.
Oh, interesting.
It makes you wonder if there's some, cultural connection there, a shared fascination with wordplay and outsmarting opponents.
It's like these tales are in conversation with each other.
Totally.
Echoing similar themes and motifs across time and cultures.
It's incredible to think about how those connections have persisted despite, geographical distance and cultural differences.
It really is.
It reminds us that even though we're focusing on American folktales, these stories are part of a much larger global tapestry.
They're connected by threads that stretch back centuries, linking us to a shared human heritage.
It's like realizing that the stories we tell, even the seemingly simple ones, are part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
Now let's shift gears and talk about a tale that highlights a truly unique blend of traditions. No Lob in the Moon.
Oh yes, that one. This Kate Verdine tale is a perfect example of how folktales can reflect the blending of cultures.
Okay, remind me, who is No Lob again?
He's a trickster character who's always getting into mischief.
Oh, right.
And in this particular story, he gets a craving for the moon.
The moon.
Yes, he thinks it's a giant slab of cheese.
Oh dear.
I know, right?
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It does, doesn't it? So he convinces his cousin, Tubin, to help him reach the moon by stacking barrels on top of each other. And of course, things don't go according to plan.
I'm picturing a very wobbly tower of barrels and a very disappointed No Lob.
It's quite a scene.
But I bet there's a lesson in there somewhere, right? About the dangers of greed, maybe.
There is.
Or not thinking things through.
It's delivered with a healthy dose of humor.
Good. I like my lessons with a side of laughter.
And the use of Criollo phrases sprinkled throughout the story adds a layer of authenticity that's really charming, It's like you're hearing the story told in its original language, even if you don't understand all the words.
It's a reminder that these folktales aren't just words on a page. They're reflections of real languages, communities, and ways of life.
Right, and they offer us a window into those worlds.
And speaking of reflections, the book mentions another Kate Verdine tale that seems to touch on some deeper social issues.
Oh, which one is that?
It's called The Girl Who Wanted to Marry a Man with a Golden Tooth.
Oh, yeah, that one's particularly interesting because it speaks to the importance of appearances and social status,
So especially in a community that's undergoing change. The story is set in a Cape Verdean community in New England.
Right.
Where a young woman becomes fixated on marrying a man who fits a specific image. Good-looking, well-dressed, and of course, sporting a gold tooth.
It sounds like a commentary on how cultural values can clash, particularly in immigrant communities navigating new social norms.
It does.
Yeah.
And the story unfolds with a mix of humor and kind of social observation. The girl's father is tasked with finding this ideal suitor, and his efforts are both comical and insightful.
It's a reminder that even seemingly lighthearted stories can offer glimpses into deeper societal shifts.
It makes you wonder how many of these folktales, while entertaining on the surface, are actually subtle critiques of, like, social norms or power dynamics, you know?
It's like they're using humor and allegory to address issues that might be too sensitive to discuss directly.
That's a brilliant point. Folktales often operate on multiple levels, offering both entertainment and social commentary.
And sometimes that commentary can be quite subversive, challenging the status quo or poking fun at those in power.
It's like a secret code embedded within the story, waiting to be deciphered by those who are in the know.
I like that.
Now, let's hop over to the French tradition and those Bouquet and Lapin tales we mentioned earlier.
Okay, sounds good.
The book highlights one called Compare Lapin and the Mule, which sounds like a classic trickster story.
It is. Bouquet and Lapin are kind of like the French version of Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox.
Oh, interesting.
They're always getting into scrapes, and Lapin usually ends up outsmarting Bouquet.
So what happens in this particular story?
Well,
Does Lapin trick Bouquet into doing something ridiculous?
he convinces Bouquet to trade his wife for a mule and a sack of peas.
His wife.
I know.
Oh, Bouquet. Promising that he'll find a way to get her back, of course.
Oh, no. Poor Bouquet, always falling for Lapin's tricks.
He never learns.
I bet this tale has a thing or two to say about the dangers of greed and not thinking things through.
It does.
It's a good lesson for us all, really. Don't let those smooth-talking tricksters lead you astray.
Words to live by. Now, let's explore some of those jack tales from the Appalachian region.
Okay.
The book describes them as being deeply rooted in the values and worldview of those communities.
These jack tales are full of adventure, resourcefulness, and that frontier spirit,
Oh, yeah.
often associated with the Appalachian Mountains.
The book focuses on one called Stiff Dick.
Oh, right. That's a good one.
What can you tell us about this Stiff Dick character?
Well, he's an interesting mix of bravado and recklessness, you know. He boasts about his strength and bravery, claiming to have killed 7 at a lick.
Whoa, okay, he sounds tough.
He's hired by a king to slay a fearsome unicorn.
Unicorn, wow.
But his approach is more about luck and trickery than actual skill.
It sounds like a classic case of overconfidence leading to trouble.
It is, and the story highlights how even those who appear strong and capable can have their weaknesses, you know. It's a reminder that true strength often lies in humility and a willingness to learn from your mistakes.
It's a good reminder that sometimes those who talk the biggest talk aren't always the ones who walk the walk.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly. Now let's move on to another iconic American folk hero, Brer Rabbit.
Ah, Brer Rabbit, the embodiment of wit and resilience.
The book highlights a tale called The 3 Little Pigs and the Old Fox,
Oh, that's a fun one.
which sounds familiar,
It does.
but I'm guessing there's a Brer Rabbit twist.
There is. The basic plot is similar to the traditional 3 Little Pigs story, but Brer Rabbit steps into the role of the clever pig who outsmarts the fox.
So instead of building a house of straw or sticks, Brer Rabbit goes straight for the stone.
Exactly. He knows how to play the game and anticipate the fox's tricks, you know. It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to win is to be one step ahead.
It's like those classic chess matches where the player who can see the furthest ahead often prevails.
That's a great analogy.
Now, what other Brer Rabbit stories does the book highlight?
Well, there's one called Mr. Rabbit and Mr. Bear. That's a classic example of Brer Rabbit using deception to his advantage.
Oh, I love those.
He pretends to be deeply religious while secretly feasting on Mr. Bear's pea crops.
Oh, that's classic Brer Rabbit, always playing the angle.
He is such a trickster.
And using his wit to outsmart those who are bigger and stronger than him.
Exactly, and it's a reminder that even those who appear small and vulnerable can find ways to resist those in power.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple animal tales can carry such profound messages about resilience and resistance.
They really can.
Now, let's dive into the rich world of Native American storytelling traditions.
Okay.
I know this is a vast and diverse area.
It is.
What specific tales does the book focus on?
Well, the book emphasizes the importance of recognizing the unique cultural contexts of these tales, so it avoids making generalizations and instead highlights specific stories from different Native American communities.
That's so important. It's about respecting the diversity of voices and perspectives within this incredibly rich storytelling tradition.
Absolutely.
What specific tale does the book showcase?
One example is a tale from the Nez Perce tradition called Coyote and the Monster.
Oh, I love coyote stories. They're always so unpredictable.
They are. This one features Coyote, a classic trickster figure in many Native American traditions, who often embodies both cleverness and foolishness.
What kind of monster does Coyote encounter in this particular tale?
It's a fearsome creature that terrorizes the land, and Coyote, being Coyote, decides to confront it.
I can only imagine the kind of chaos that ensues when Coyote decides to take on a monster.
Well, let's just say it involves a lot of trickery, a bit of luck, and Coyote's trademark blend of wit and foolishness.
So does he defeat the monster?
He does. It's a classic example of a tale that explores themes of courage, resourcefulness, and the triumph of good over evil.
It sounds like a classic David and Goliath story with a trickster twist.
Exactly, and it highlights how trickster figures can be both entertaining and instructive.
Right. They embody the complexities of human nature, and the challenges of navigating a world full of dangers and uncertainties. It's a reminder that even within a single culture, storytelling traditions can encompass a wide range of themes, characters, and perspectives.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Speaking of perspectives, this book isn't just about showcasing different folktales. It also raises some thought-provoking questions about how these tales have been collected and studied over the years, right?
That's a crucial point. The book delves into the history of American folktale scholarship, highlighting both the achievements and the challenges of preserving these oral traditions.
Right. It's a reminder that even the act of collecting and presenting these tales is shaped by the perspectives of those involved.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious, what specific figures or debates does the book highlight within the field of folklore studies?
Well, one figure who looms large is Richard Dorson, a prominent folklorist who argued for a more rigorous, analytical approach to studying folktales.
Oh, interesting.
He believed that understanding the context in which a tale is told is essential to fully appreciating its meaning and significance.
It sounds like he was advocating for a more nuanced understanding of these stories, recognizing that they're not just isolated texts, but reflections of complex cultural systems.
Exactly. He was critical of attempts to sanitize or romanticize folktales, arguing that their raw, unvarnished nature is part of what makes them so powerful.
It makes you think about the choices that scholars and editors have to make when presenting these tales to a wider audience.
Right. It's a tough balance.
How do you strike a balance between accessibility and authenticity?
That's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer. It's about being transparent about the editorial choices that are made, acknowledging the limitations of translating oral traditions into written form, and respecting the integrity of the original storytellers and their communities.
It's a reminder that even the act of collecting and presenting folktales is an act of interpretation.
Right.
Shaped by the perspectives and biases of those involved.
But it also sounds like Dorson was pushing for a more grounded approach, one that recognized the social and historical realities that shaped these tales.
That emphasis on context is crucial to understanding how folktales function within a culture,
Totally.
They're not just entertainment. They're often ways of transmitting knowledge, values, and beliefs.
Right. They're like cultural blueprints.
It's like each tale is a piece of a larger puzzle. And by understanding the context, we can start to see how those pieces fit together to create a more complete picture of a culture.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring folktales so engaging.
It's not just about passive consumption.
No, it's about active engagement, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
It's about recognizing that these tales, while rooted in the past, continue to speak to us in the present, offering insights into the human condition and the enduring power of storytelling.
Beautifully put.
And speaking of the present, I'm eager to hear how these tales have adapted and evolved in a world that's vastly different from the one in which they originated.
That's what we'll explore in our final segment. Get ready to see how these seemingly timeless tales have found new ways to resonate with contemporary audiences.
Welcome back to our final dive into the world of American folktales. We've journeyed through so many diverse traditions, from those witty Juan Bobo tales to the enduring wisdom of Native American storytelling.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But now I'm curious about how these stories, so often rooted in rural communities and passed down orally, have fared in a world that's increasingly dominated by technology and mass media.
Right.
It's a big shift.
It is a huge shift.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is how adaptable these tales have proven to be.
Yeah.
They might be rooted in the past, but they've found all sorts of ways to stay relevant in our modern world.
So it's not a case of these stories fading away.
Right.
It's more like they've evolved to fit new contexts.
Exactly. And this book gives some great examples of how that's happened.
Of course.
For instance, it talks about how classic tales like Little Red Riding Hood have been reinterpreted to reflect modern sensibilities.
Oh, Little Red Riding Hood. I remember hearing different versions of that story growing up.
Right.
Some were pretty dark and focused on the dangers lurking in the woods,
Yeah,
while others were more lighthearted and emphasized Little Red's cleverness.
exactly. And the book points out how those variations often reflect changing societal values and anxieties.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, while older versions might have focused on obedience and the dangers of straying from the path, more modern versions might emphasize female empowerment, with Little Red outsmarting the wolf through her own intelligence and courage.
It's like the story itself becomes a mirror reflecting the times.
It does.
It makes you realize how these tales, even the ones we think we know so well, are constantly being reshaped and reinterpreted.
They're constantly evolving.
And it's not just about adapting to social changes, right?
Yeah.
It's also about finding new ways to connect with audiences in a media-saturated world.
Right, like how do you make these ancient tales relevant to people who are bombarded with information 24/7?
Yeah, exactly. So how has that happened?
Well, the book talks about how folk tales have inspired games, theatrical performances, and even interactive museum exhibits.
I love that. It's like these tales are breaking free from the confines of books and finding all sorts of new ways to come alive.
Exactly. Think about the enduring popularity of fairy tale themed movies and TV shows.
Oh, right.
Those stories, while often adapted and embellished for the screen, still tap into a deep well of cultural fascination.
Yeah, there's definitely something about those stories that continues to resonate with people, even in our modern technology-driven world.
Absolutely. It's proof that these tales have a staying power that goes far beyond the printed page.
It really does make you appreciate the power of storytelling, how these tales can connect with us on such a fundamental level, regardless of how they're presented.
They tap into universal themes and emotions that transcend time and culture.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by the sheer variety and richness of American folktales.
It's been an amazing exploration.
We've covered so much ground, from the witty tricksters of the Iberian and Cape Verdean traditions to the resourceful heroes of the Appalachian Mountains and the enduring wisdom of Native American storytelling.
It's like we've taken a whirlwind tour of America's cultural landscape, you know?
It is. It's clear that America's folklore is a tapestry woven from countless threads, each representing a unique cultural perspective.
And it's a tapestry that continues to evolve as new voices and perspectives add their own patterns and colors.
It's a reminder that these traditions are living, breathing things, constantly changing and adapting to reflect the world around them.
They're a reflection of who we are as a people, both individually and collectively.
This deep dive has truly been an eye-opening experience.
It has been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
It's challenged me to look beyond the familiar, to see the depth and complexity behind seemingly simple stories, and to appreciate the enduring power of oral tradition.
And as we bid farewell to this captivating world, I encourage you, our listener, to keep exploring. Seek out the folk tales of your own heritage. Discover the stories from cultures that are new to you. You never know what hidden treasures and timeless truths you might uncover.
That's a fantastic note to end on.
It has been a joy diving into these tales with you.
Until next time, keep diving deep and never stop exploring the power of stories.
Happy reading!
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Cinderella in America by William Bernard McCarthy. Here at English Insights, we celebrate the beauty of storytelling and its role in preserving culture. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating explorations. See you next time.